become a reality in the marketplace, many new capabilities and possibilities emerge, such as network slicing, ultra-low latency, lightning fast speeds, and extreme reliability, to mention a few. And these capabilities and are enabling many new use cases, from remote controlling vehicles in a mine to small sensors that have the lifespan of 10 years. These technology features will transform the current logic in many businesses and create new markets for those who seize the possibilities. In fact, how we apply and combine technologies to solve problems is the bedrock of a good innovation. For example, when we can solve more than one problem, our innovation is better than the one which solved only a single problem. An example here is YouTube. Today, we are going to be talking about the role of available and feasible technology in making our products more usable, scalable, and inclusive. The topic for the day is the technological imperative. We will have the Q&A at the end of the keynote. For the keynote, we have with us Mr. Alan Greenberg. Previously, Director, Apple Education EMEA, then Director, Apple Education China and Asia Pacific, Alan Greenberg led the team that built education podcasting. In this project, he managed the launch of iTunes U throughout UK, Europe, then China, and worked on the development of Apple Education mobile strategy and iOS education apps. He developed the Seed CSR project in China, a collaboration between Apple, Foxconn, and Pearson. He is an external senior advisor to McKinsey, a venture partner to EDT&Partners Education, and a trust architect at Immutable Insight, a blockchain fund. Thank you so much, Alan, for joining us today. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Can I share my screen now?
Sure.
So good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. I'm not sure which time zone I'm in. I'm currently sitting in London, and I want to thank you for inviting me to this event. It is truly an honor to be here with Amdocs, and I'm going to share some perspectives with you, which hopefully will be interesting and useful to your audience. So by way of a little background, as was previously indicated, I spent 5.5 years working with Apple. I was fortunate enough to be part of the European team between the years of 2004 and 2007. In those years, I was invited to develop podcasting, and podcasting was built out of HEC Business School in Paris and University of Lyon. And it was a project to disseminate and distribute education content. And the slide that I'm showing you now is a curious one, because what I want to sort of present today, or what I want to give you some insights to, is that when the podcasting project started with Apple, there was no revenue attached to this, which was a challenge for a business leader. So that was one little problem. And the second issue was that no one had any idea or any perspective of scale. Now, the figure that you see in front of you is a figure of 10 billion downloads, which I went back to Apple for a visit into the US in, I think it was 2016, 2017. And I met up with a colleague of mine, James Boggs, and James shared with me this number, which is not in the public domain. And at that period of time, this is January 2017, I think, the downloads of Apple Podcasts had gone past 10 billion downloads. I didn't even know how many zeros there were in 10 billion. I left the meeting and I went to Wikipedia and I asked Wikipedia how many zeros in 10 billion, and they said it was 10. So I got a piece of paper out and I wrote the number 10 billion, the number you see in front of you. And when you write something like that down and you see the size of it, the scale of it, it begins to dawn on you quite what you've been involved in and what you've contributed towards. Because you can't predict these sort of numbers, but you can build these sort of numbers. So 10, 12 years, dissemination of education content through iTunes U, through the podcasting portal, not just in education, but across a number of areas. This was a level of success or a level of achievement in terms of what was achieved at Apple. And when I look at Amdocs, and I was invited to explore some of the initiatives and explore some of the work that Amdocs does as a company, I was reminded of this particular opportunity and event at Apple. And it seems to me that Amdocs is a company well placed and in a position to scale and to help develop technology companies, technology collaborations, particularly in this post-COVID environment. And we'll come to that and discuss that in some detail in the next few minutes. So today I have a portfolio of companies. I work with McKinsey, for example. I'm a senior external advisor to McKinsey. I'm not sure whether senior is because I'm old or whether I've got some domain expertise, but it's exciting to collaborate with them. I have exciting collaboration with DevClever PLC, which is a public company out of the UK, driving innovation globally, particularly with an initiative in India. And I'll share a little bit about that in a few minutes. I have an interest in blockchain services, so not crypto, but looking at building out blockchain capabilities and disciplines around digital identity, around digital wallets, around digital asset management, and a number of other areas, so tokens and some other areas in there, which I do think is particularly important in terms of trust and in building capabilities going forward. I have an education consultancy business I contribute towards, EDT&Partners, and I'm very proud and pleased to be part of Speakin's mentor team and some of the advisors, so another rich collaboration. Today's subject, the subject I was set was the imperative of technology, the feasibility of technology, and technology is everywhere. Try switching your phone off for a week and see how you get on. Try not using your computer for a week and see how that affects your life. The technology is with all of us everywhere all the time. And I think it's important to understand the trust piece, the trust we need in our technology, not just to work, but to actually drive relevance, to connect us with the things that are important to us, to provide us with a level of service, level of engagement, which is key. And again, that's fundamental to what Amdocs is setting out to do, what Amdocs already does for its customers, and what it will continue to do going forward.
Alan, I request you to please move this. We are able to see the first slide.
Sorry, say again.
We are able to see only the first slide. So can you move the slides?
I'm moving them now. You can't see them transitioning?
No.
Okay, let me
You're
try.
able to see only the...
Not yet.
Okay, so that's interesting. So let me know if this is transitioning now. For some reason, it's telling me my screen share is paused. I'm going to, okay, this is interesting. Okay, now I'm struggling. Let's see if this works. Okay, do we see a transition?
No, still stuck on the first one. We can do it like this, if that's fine. Yes.
Okay, so let me exit this and let's try and do it this way. So at this point in time, you can see the slides, yes? And you can see me moving the slides forward?
Right, yeah.
Okay, so as someone who used to work for Apple and is working on Keynote and doesn't understand why this is not working, please accept my apology. But let's use this mode and to see if we can make this happen for each of us. So Apple, 10 billion downloads, portfolio of companies, Amdocs. The point I want to start with, or the point I will continue with, is that your chief executive, Amdocs chief executive, on a stage in Barcelona at the Mobile World Congress, was talking about that our industry, the industry, it will facilitate Web3. It cannot exist without Amdocs, without the services that you guys provide. And I would argue that both everything is the same and everything is different in a post-COVID environment. And let me try and explain to you what I mean by that. Distributed networks. It's interesting to see what has happened in the last 2 years. COVID comes along, impacts across the world, schools are closing, businesses are closing, retail is closing. But what has happened is that we're now in a post-COVID environment. And the consequences of post-COVID is that we need to actually facilitate a distributed network. And what I mean by that is distributed network, B2B2C for schools, the ability to provide a joined up process so the schools can actually connect with parents and deliver homeschooling. With universities and colleges would advocate, they've been doing remote learning and remote resources for some years now, but in real terms, have they? I mean, when many students are actually paying for their education, certainly in the English system and many other countries, this is a challenge. And the distribution of education content through the universities has been one of, how do I put it, adding some value rather than being the critical connection. And although students are returning to university and returning to colleges, actually that distribution model is now a key component of how their learning is facilitated. And we need to look at that. And many companies, many organizations who advocate they can do this are actually not delivering against the promise or the requirement for the consumer. Then you look at enterprise, and you only need to look into the enterprise world. Many of us are I'm still sitting in my bedroom in South London. I am going to meetings and I am meeting people, but whether I will actually return to the office on a full-time basis, 5, 6, 7 days a week is unlikely. So you've got distributed networks. An example of that is PricewaterhouseCoopers. They have some 22, I think, employees in the United Kingdom alone. Only 6,000 of them will actually have a desk in an office and will actually use that desk in an office. So you have distributed networks where people are working remotely, working from their homes, working from other places. We need to look at that particular challenge, and again, facilitating that in 2022 and beyond is a key component of this opportunity. Then we start to look at the paradigm shift. So the digital transformation, serving clients' priorities, which is something that Amdocs works very hard to do and speaks very highly of. And I would argue that we are now in a world where the data imperative is key. It's not just a case of providing resources, it's not just a case of Google analysis. We have to actually drive real data. We need qualitative and quantitative data to help us understand the engagement with our customers, the engagement that they have with their clients, and to really drive that data imperative. And data in itself is challenging because data is not pure. There's lots of gap analysis that needs to be dealt with, lots of other issues. The analysis of data is a key challenge to almost any business. And part of that is to do with the flow of data between the interaction with the customer, the consumer, the individual, and actually the repository of knowledge and sharing that data back out. I referred to a little earlier digital identity. I would argue today that one of the key ramifications of COVID is in terms of providing the individual with their own digital identity and their own digital wallet, which contains their data, which they can manage and serve in their own way. For example, if you engage with healthcare, with hospitals and doctors, for example, having the hospitals, having the doctors contain all your data and allowing them or permitting them to be the manager of that data can be challenging at times. Surely it would be better that we all have our own digital wallet. In that wallet, we have our own digital healthcare information. We can choose who to share that with. We're carrying that with us. We are ultimately the patient or the people dealing with the challenge we have in front of us. So the paradigm shift in how we manage data in health, how we manage data in education is going to be a key component. When I was talking about the distributed networks in education, surely today we have the technology, the capability to deliver a personal learning journey and ultimately a personal learning outcome. Now, why is that important? Because I would argue, where does learning happen? Where does teaching happen? Teaching happens in a classroom, happens in a lecture hall. Learning happens everywhere else. And the classroom is flawed by nature. Not that I'm advocating shutting down schools or shutting down universities, far from it. It has to be a blended solution. But surely we need to recognize the individual challenges of each individual student. I mean, if you take the example of the classroom, you've got a classroom with 30 kids. The best the teacher can hope for is engaging with 20 who are in the average. There will be 5 at the bottom of the class who are below average. We need to be able to identify their challenges, their needs, and bring them up to the average. But equally, there are 5 at the top of the class who are being drawn back to the average because we cannot accelerate their learning. So the challenge is now finding that personal learning journey, that personal learning outcome for each individual student, whether they're in the classroom, whether they're at home, whether in university or college, and actually providing adaptive education opportunities, AI, personalization of education to achieve those objectives. These are one of the biggest challenges and one of the major challenges coming out of COVID, and I think we're already on a path to deliver against that promise. Paradigm shift number 2.
Alan, just one sec, sorry to interrupt.
Of course.
Is there any possibility we can hide the sidebar?
I'm not sure I can do both at the same time.
From the on the right side.
Okay, now let me try and do that. Okay, let's try and do it that way. Is that better?
Yeah, it's much better.
Okay, well, we can go back to the beginning and start again, but I'm assuming your audience would rather I continue than do that.
No worries.
Okay.
We can
That's English humor. That's irony from London. So paradigm shift number 2. Data is as the core component and the resource. The more we can actually have qualitative and quantitative data, the more we understand where we are, the more we drive relevance. And relevance is all about context, of understanding where we are in that exchange. And again, Amdocs as an organization, as a company with the technology you have and capability you have, your responsibility is to focus and drive that relevance. There's another piece to that, which I think is about what I refer to as an impact audit. So what I don't want today is anecdotes about where I am with my data, my impact with my clients. I really want an audit. I want to be able to qualify that. It's very interesting. There's a book by Sir Ronald Cohen called Impact, which I recommend to the audience. In that book, Sir Ronald Cohen talks about the fact that prior to the 1930s financial crash, there was no auditing of companies. After the 1930s crash, auditing came into play. Companies were not very happy about that. They didn't like the idea that the public would be able to audit their company, would be able to see their financial results, would be able to make a decision whether they were an ethical and a financially sound fiduciary company. But actually 90 years later, we wouldn't do business with a company that wasn't audited. We wouldn't do business with a company that didn't have financial reporting. That's one of the paradigms, one of the fundamental requirements we have in terms of doing business with companies. But I would argue in 2022, should we not be impacting or auditing impact in other areas, with climate change, with our ethics, with our ability to drive diversity, with the challenges we have within society? Surely auditing of other components other than just our financial management is becoming a key component. Now, this isn't a particularly original idea. If you look into ESG, and the ESG movement is one of about social, about governance, about driving this information so we can have a better picture of the companies we're dealing with, the people we're working with, and understanding that. And that is a data challenge. And ultimately, off the back of that, I believe the paradigm shift number 2 is about building sustainability, is building lifelong relationships with our clients and with our colleagues, about building that engagement into a deeper, more sustainable basis. It's difficult enough building relationships, but I would argue it's critical to maintain those relationships and to keep that sustainability in place. Then paradigm shift number 3, I think, is another major challenge which Amdocs embraces and addresses, which is to do with the fact that it is not a one-stop-fits-all. Whether you are an American company bringing your technology to the world, or whether you're an Indian company bringing your technology and sharing that into new markets. One of the major challenges is understanding localization, understanding the local culture, understanding that it is not a one-stop-fits-all, the personalization of what you do and work with clients, and understanding their challenges from a social point of view, from a cultural point of view, from not just a language point of view. The language is almost the easiest one to solve, but actually understand the paradigm of how you need to work with clients and how you need to engage, and ultimately building that product market fit. And when I looked into Amdocs and I started to investigate and to read some of the work you do and some of the engagement you do, I really do think that you are a remarkable company. I really do think this is part of your ethos. I think it's part of your go-to-market strategy. But again, I think that it's a education challenge in terms of helping your customers and helping the relationships understand what is possible and what can be done in this particular area and how you can support them through your services. So just to give you an insight into a project that is one of my projects, this is a project called ulearn.net. It's built with, or built in a public company, DevClever PLC out of the UK. And the challenge with ulearn is providing STEM education to an audience of homeschooling, of basically remote learning. And when we started looking at this, so this was leveraging already 750 STEM education assets built in VR and AR by a company called Viative, which is a portfolio company of DevClever, and looking how we could deliver that augmented reality VR solution into a B2B2C model and working with clients and working at scale. And one of the challenges that I had with this is that there is lots of STEM education. How do you differentiate? How do you deal with quality control? How do you bring the real resources, and how do you personalize this to each individual? So when we started looking at this, I started to bring in some colleagues of mine and looking at how we could profile the students within this ecosystem. So literally building a Q&A, profile building, GDPR compliant understanding of where this individual student is in their individual learning journey, and looking at social and emotional learning, looking at soft skills, looking to build not just the academic piece in terms of helping young people be the best version of themselves, but also understanding their mental health, their well-being, their challenges in terms of remote learning, remote engagement, the challenges of interacting with each other. So the social and emotional learning piece, I would argue, is probably the most important attribute of uLearn as a platform. And then we have the technology, the pedagogy, and the pedagogy. And the pedagogy is about matching this rich content to the different cultures, to the different localization challenges, to the different opportunities that present uLearn. And we're looking to work with a number of major telco companies, looking at distribution models, looking at how we can bring the uLearn platform to work with the telco companies who, if you think about the logic of it, the telco companies have the digital identity of the individual. They have the telephone number. They understand the customer in their portfolio. And again, if you look at some major telco companies with 350 million customers on a global basis, a huge proportion of those customers will have families and will have children. A huge proportion of that community will be challenged with homeschooling and how to get the best education resources for their children and private tuition. So the telco companies can be a major conduit to the distribution of rich education content on a personalized basis to each individual student, supporting their mental health and their well-being through social and emotional learning, and actually driving engagement and driving assessment and capability. And that's ultimately what uLearn is built to do. And we're also looking at building that out into the meta, into augmented reality and VR. So we're looking at that particular opportunity and evolving that engagement in terms of finding that personal journey for each of those students. And just to bring that back to the telco piece, the engagement piece is about understanding there are digital devices in the hands of many people on a global basis, and using the telco infrastructure, the telco environment to be able to share, to grow that capability, to manage the data, because the data is a key component of that, to actually be able to cross-fertilize capabilities across the telco enterprise. So not just a telephone and a telephone contract, but actually bringing added value, real resources, education resources. And I would point out to you, we're not only looking at that in terms of educating children in schools, we also have another program within DevClever, which is called Launch My Career, which is about helping people in the workplace. Launch My Career, for example, has already an engagement with 7,000 academies in India who are looking to help young people in their workplace learning. And in that initial pilot program, they have already 3.5 million students. So again, delivering at scale, going back to my point about the podcasting project. These technologies have the ability to deliver at scale, to deliver sustainability, to bring real value, to bring real relevance to those markets. I put this slide in because I wanted to bring this back to the summit. And I wanted to point out that although I'm delivering one component of this subject, or we've been discussing one particular aspect, which is the feasibility of technology, you cannot exclude the two other areas. You cannot exclude the viability of business, and you cannot exclude people and their desirability. So what I really like about Amdocs philosophy is that they have that little star in the center, that point where you have the convergence of great, solid, sustainable technology. You have the management structure to drive viable businesses, to drive the data pieces that helps that. And you have an understanding of the culture of how to bring people together in order to bring value to them and to make that work. So for me, it's not purely about the feasibility of technology. It's not just about the opportunity to engage, the opportunity to drive services, not just pushing stuff out, but actually helping to consolidate and to support society, helping people to understand that there are other pieces of the jigsaw to build relationships, to build collaboration. So for me, the opportunity, and going back to the slide, business viability, technology feasibility, people desirability, is in the differentiation. And the differentiation for me, when I look at Amdocs and look at the work you're doing, is about collaboration. I think you are a collaboration company. You have the ability to drive the foundations to infrastructure that supports the digital aspirations of many of your clients, and the ability to not just fulfill a promise in day one, but to help them scale and build their businesses over time. That for me is particularly remarkable and particularly important, and particularly in these times where, how do I put this, collaboration is becoming key. I mean, I don't want to make any political statement, but when we look at the challenges that are happening currently in Eastern Europe and the problems that are going on there, one of the positive outcomes from that is the world generally is beginning to talk to each other, is finding ways to collaborate, is finding ways to have a consensus, to have an opportunity. Surely that is an optimistic platform, an optimistic opportunity where collaboration on a global basis will become normal rather than unusual. Then you have the differentiation around education. I would argue that education is for 3-year-olds to 83-year-olds. That's unfair to 2-year-olds and 84-year-olds. Education is not just about schools and colleges and university and about enterprise. It lives with us all the time. We're always learning. We always have the ability, or we have the opportunity, to extend our learning, to find more experience. And certainly when it comes to workplace and skills, there is no career in the world that you're just fixed, that you get a university degree or you get a certificate that you're a doctor. You have to continue that learning process. And what Amdocs does very well is to provide that infrastructure to support that lifelong learning, continued professional development, workplace learning, education resources, not just in the institutions that we immediately think about of schools and universities and colleges, but literally across enterprise and across the whole domain. And whether it's specifically about education, I think the third differentiation is about thought leadership and insights. News. One of the challenges is finding the news sources or the information sources that are relevant to us. I come back to the relevance argument. It's not that I don't want to read a newspaper. I read lots of newspapers and I choose which newspapers I read. But what I do want to do from a digital point of view is to drive relevance. I don't want the whole of the internet. I just want the bits of the internet that's relevant to me. So my interests, my personalization, my digital wallet, the information I need to make me the best version of myself that allows me to engage with my clients, engage with my colleagues and friends. So relevance is key and a key component of the demands and the feasibility of technology. And finally, in this particular area, I'd like to again highlight culture. And culture is both internal in an organization. So building a company, an organization with tens of thousands of employees who are distributed on a global basis, but building a culture of trust, of intimacy, where each individual can feel part of this journey, be part of this opportunity. Believe you me, when you build that culture, we had it at Apple, I've had it in other companies I work for, I have it today in DevClever, but when you build that culture, your clients and your colleagues and your relationships will recognize that. It's the most important component. It's not about marketing. It's not about PR. It's not about corporate social responsibility. It's about having passionate people who want to fulfill their potential, who want to help fulfill the potential of a company and support them in that journey. And I sort of recognize that within Amdocs today, and I hope and aspire that that is a priority in terms of the company and your aspirations going forward. So, sustainability, we've touched on that. I think if you adopt these competencies, if you look at the disciplines that I've sort of addressed and tried to articulate on, and again, it's challenging because we could spend a lot of time talking about every one. If we talk about lifetime value of customer, this is particularly important to me. I know from my own experience, I've been around long enough to know that gaining a customer is tough, keeping a customer even more tough. But that is a key component, a key discipline that has to be deployed in business today. And there is something which, again, I feel very strongly about, comes back to the impact audit bit, is I think the word trust needs to be a key component in our philosophy, in our business engagement, in what we do. If we trust our partners, if we trust our customers, if our customers trust us, if that trust coefficient is in place, then we have something special and we can build remarkable opportunities and really drive innovation and change. And again, I think that is a culture question, not necessarily a spreadsheet question. So I would encourage us all to consider that as we move forward. So if this sounds like an endorsement for Amdocs, it absolutely is. And I make no bones about it. I mean, I've been invited to do this presentation to you today, and it's obviously interesting to do it. But what I recognize in my dealings with Amdocs and my conversation with Amdocs is a company which is authentic, a company which is passionate, a company which is focused on the future. And if my words today are endorsing this company, it is without reservation that I give that endorsement. I recognize in Amdocs many of the characteristics that I had the privilege to recognize within Apple previously and other companies I work with. It's special, it is unusual, it needs to be celebrated, it needs to be enjoyed. So synergy is where I think is at. And at that point, I'd like to conclude and invite questions if there are questions, and apologize in advance that I can't demonstrate the slides. There's beautiful transitions, there's lots of flashing lights, there's lots of things going on. So you've just had to listen to me and let me work through this. Maybe I should transfer to PowerPoint. Maybe that would be a good idea. I don't know if anybody has any comments on that. So would anybody like to ask a question or challenge some of the assumptions that I presented today? Very happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Alan. And for the slides, the most important thing for us is the insights that you highlighted, and that's the key.
Yeah, but what about the 4 or 5 days? What about the 4 or 5 days work building these slides? I need to kick my computer. and just to say, if anybody wants a copy of these slides, they are available for distribution.
Sure. Yeah, again, some great insights that you highlighted. Some of the things that really stuck with me is how you mentioned the position of Amdocs in the industry now, the impact of COVID and how it's changed how people see the cultures and how we are transforming each other to become better at the scenarios that we are given. The digital information transformation that is happening all across the industry, and how collaboration plays a really crucial role in the transformation journeys. Now, switching to the Q&As, I will take questions from our LinkedIn audience and from the audience that have joined us on Zoom. So for all of the folks that are on Zoom, you can put your questions on the Q&A section. And for the LinkedIn folks, you can add your questions on the comments. So we have one question from Chandrakant. What do you mean by ESG in paradigm shift 2? Could you elaborate a little more on that?
Okay, so ESG is relatively new. And what ESG stands for is looking at investment in companies. They not only need to be economic, but they need to be social and they need to have governance. It is not just good enough to work with a company that is not looking into the challenges of society, be that climate change challenges, be that diversity challenges. There are many, many challenges. So there are there are different coefficients, there are different components of how you measure the success of a business. And again, it's not whether I think this is a good idea or not a good idea. I'm saying to you, I think that society is demanding that this is relevant, that you cannot build a company the way you might have done 20, 30 years ago. You have to be conscious of the footprint that you make in society. You have to be respectful of the challenges you might have in terms of plastics and the disposable of plastics, or whatever the scenario is. There's an ethical footprint. I would argue also, when we look at social media, for example, Twitter is not my favorite domain, to be frank. I'm not saying that Twitter isn't good. Twitter has its uses and its values, but I do not want to get into a squabble or a debate with 100,000 people just because I have an opinion. I have an opinion, and I'm very happy to meet and discuss those opinions with people in a proper environment. But social media troubles me a little bit. I'm worried about some of the challenges of social media. I'm worried about false news. I'm worried about some of the issues that are challenging society these days. So I think that when we look at ESG, I think it's important that we actually build businesses that are ethical, that are focused, that are good for shareholders, but good for society at the same time. I hope that answers. There was a second part to the question. ESG was one part of it. What was the other part of the question?
Yeah, just you wanted for a little more elaboration on that. So I guess you covered all of it.
Okay,
Thanks
but
for that.
the word I would add to that is that in my world, in my businesses, in the work that I do, trust is a very, very key component. It's probably one of the most important words or challenges in any business engagement, but trust is the key one.
Absolutely, 100% agree on that. Another question we have from Akash. How do you look at the journey of continuous learning? How someone can be always motivated to learn new things? Which platforms would you suggest for working professionals to keep learning latest things in the market?
Okay, it's a really good question. So let me give you an example. One of the things I'm working on is what I would refer to as linear assessment. And what is linear assessment? I mean, one of the challenges is what is the value of a university degree today? A university degree will get you a job interview, okay? And if you go to a good university, it'll probably put you ahead of other people who've gone to maybe secondary universities. But it's a rigid, fixed set of circumstances. But linear assessment is really interesting. Well, what I mean by linear assessment, if you take a doctor, for example, a doctor doesn't know necessarily 100% of a problem, but the doctor also doesn't know 0% of a problem. He or she will know a percentage of that problem. If you take stem cells, for example, stem cells, almost every single doctor in the world today was not taught about stem cells when they went to medical school. So they're dependent on continued professional development, on lifelong learning to learn what they need to learn. And they may have a view on stem cells, which might be, for argument's sake, 35% of knowledge. And a patient comes to them with a problem, and they need to accelerate their learning in order to be able to address the problem or to address the challenge that they're dealing with. So they accelerate their learning, they do research, they find the information they need to be able to answer the question, and maybe going through the exercise, they reach 55% of competency in that subject. Then what may happen is that it might be a year or 2 years before they have to revisit that same problem again. So when they go back to that problem, they may not still be at 55%, they might have fallen back to 45% of knowledge. But if you understand their personal learning journey, and if you understand their personal learning outcomes, and understand they're now at 45% of knowledge, and you can accelerate them to 65% of knowledge, that's hugely valuable. And to do that in such a manner that is elegant, intuitive, and capable, allows you to drive that relevance engine of what's needed. So I would argue linear assessment in terms of work, compliance, lifelong learning, professional development is a key component. Abrisium out of Cambridge University is one company that does this extremely well. Another company, one of the companies that I have a relationship with, is a company called Area 9, which is out of Copenhagen and Boston. And they're particularly interesting because what Area 9 does on their platform, which is they don't call it a learning management system, but it is an education platform. But what they have the ability to do is not just understand through the capable platform from Area 9, not just understand the personal learning journey of each individual, they also understand their well-being and mental health within that. So they have the ability through their data sets, through the way the platform is set up, is not just to help the individual learning, but to help the outcomes and support people from a mental and well-being point of view. So Area 9 and Abrisium would be two that I'd reference. And another company that I know and work with out of H-Farm in Venice have a product called Maze Plus. And Maze Plus is also focused on social and emotional learning and the capability to help individuals be the best version of themselves. And you learn, just for a personal plug.
Thanks, Simon. We have another question. You said telco have digital identity of the customer. Is it ethical to create digital identity of a customer without the consent from customer? Isn't it intruding personal space? Just a thought on ethical side than the business side. And to a certain aspect of it, I'll add my point and my view, a little bit of my view as well. We in the industry, we see that privacy is really a huge concern right now from how we can decentralize information. And so what are your views on it, on a wider aspect?
Okay, so it's a really good question and it's a really big subject. So I work with Verum out of Zurich. If you go to Verum, if you go to Capital, you'll see there's a blockchain services business, which is one of the most successful blockchain services businesses globally, and friends and partners. And some of the work we're doing with them is around digital identity and digital wallet. So my point is, it is your data. You, the individual, own that data. Not Google, not Microsoft, not Apple, not Amazon. None of these companies should own your data. It is your data. You should be able to have your data in your own wallet, like you have your own wallet where you keep your credit cards, or you keep your money. It's your wallet, it's your money, it's your credit card. And that is private and personal to you. You don't need to tell people how much money you have in the bank. You don't need to tell them how many credit cards you have. You don't need to tell anybody anything. But at a point in time, you will take that credit card out of your wallet. You will do a transaction. You've obviously got enough money on the credit card to pay the transaction, or the transaction wouldn't go through. So there's an exchange of data at that point in time in purely paying for a product using a credit card. So my point is, why can you not exchange data the same way, whether it's your health data or your knowledge data? Let me give you an example. In the work we're doing with DevClever, particularly around Launch My Career, that digital wallet, that identity piece, not only shows your competencies, in other words, have I passed a certain test? Am I competent to a certain level? It will also help show your characteristics. I'm a reasonably nice person. I am hardworking. I turn up on time. I have good references. When you go to an employer and you're looking for employment, surely that information of whether I'm a good person and hardworking and sincere is actually even more valuable than whether I'm competent to do a job. Because if I'm not competent to do a job, you can probably train me to do the job better. That's the easy bit. But am I worth training? Am I a good person? Am I industrious? Is something. So that whole piece around digital identity, digital wallet, built on the blockchain, built in a trust environment, having the ownership of that wallet. It is your wallet. It is your data, nobody else's. And you can choose to share it or not share it. Another example, Apple have a program, the health program, with their apps, with the health apps on the Apple platform. And it is an opt-in program. You can choose to share your engagement with fitness apps, with research organizations. It's not compulsory, it's an opt-in opportunity. But by sharing that data back, you might just save the life of one person. You might just improve the health outcomes for someone. So in a collaborative environment, in a established trust environment of anonymized data, providing resources, I would argue I'm personally happy to share that information because hopefully it's good for my own health and the health of my family. So there are ecosystems evolving, but I think it's also critical to understand that you need to be working with a partner you can trust, which is why I come back to the endorsement of Amdocs. Amdocs has the capability, it has the ethics component, it has a mission statement, which is about trust And that is why I'm comfortable talking about this on this stage, and I might be less comfortable talking about it on other stages.
Yeah, our brand is now make it amazing for ourselves, for our customers. So yes, absolutely agree with you on that. We have one question from LinkedIn. Um, it's a question of, does technology drive innovation, or is it innovation that drives technology? What would you say on that?
That's a great question. Yeah, that is, I mean, you know, have you got an easy question for me? I mean, I think it's both, but I would argue this. I mean, I'm very lucky. I work with some of the smartest people you could ever imagine, literally all over the world. I have relationships with some extraordinary people, but it is, and I made a comment on the slide earlier, it is about people. I mean, any smart investor invest in people, they don't invest in technology. It is people at the end of the day who build stuff. It's people who make things happen. It's people you can be inspired by. It's people you can collaborate with. Technology is just a means to an end. But if the people are not good people, ethical people, hardworking people, intelligent people, whatever the adjective is, then you're probably wasting your time. So for me, it's about trust. It's about relationship, about collaboration. It's also about openness and transparency. I have a reputation of being outspoken, and not everybody likes what I say. I talk about the fact I'd rather be respected than liked. I mean that quite seriously. I mean, respect is valuable to me. Being liked, I have friends. I do have one or two friends. But the like bit is less important to me. It's not that I need to be liked. I want to be respected. If I'm respected, I can drive innovation. I can drive opportunities. I can scale businesses. I can make stuff. So that's what's important. So it's about people, but really good question. But innovation ultimately comes from the human, hopefully.
And whenever someone is trying to challenge the status quo, it's something that is not always welcomed every time. But that's the beauty of it, how we approach things differently and carry on with it. How we can approach other folks into thinking into the direction, getting new perspectives, and sharing that on across the industry, across our teammates, across. This is what we mean when we say building an inclusive culture where all the questions are working. And so, yeah,
it's about transparency. It's also about leadership. And I think leadership is key. But I mean, I'm the eternal optimist. I will always be the eternal optimist. I think there are opportunities to improve society, to improve the outcomes for individuals, be that in their education, be that in their health, be that in many, many different ways. And there are technologies evolving. And I mean, one of the last comments I'd like to make, I see COVID as an opportunity. Okay, and I don't want to be in any way disparaging to people who may have suffered through COVID, but COVID has been a paradigm shift. Okay, stuff which I've been advocating for years and talking to people, and they say, okay, Alan, this is really nice and it'd be nice to have. It's not nice to have anymore. This is critical stuff. This is really important. This is how we build back society. This is how we make things better. So there are opportunities everywhere, but we need to work with trusted partners. We need to work with partners who have the capability, infrastructure, resources to support those journeys. And I invite companies who want to build at scale, who want to build companies that impact, to look into businesses like Amdocs and see how they can support them in that journey. And I repeat again, if this sounds like an endorsement, it absolutely is an endorsement.
Yeah, I have got one really interesting question, and I would love to see what you think about this. How you are planning to package home learning platform with the help of mobile service providers, and how it will be different from other free e-learning platforms that are available right now, such as BBC, BitSize, and Singh.
Well, I'm not going to criticize other people, but I'm an arrogant SOB, and I think I can do it better than other people, and I think I've done it better than other people previously. So let me put it this way. It's a matter of understanding the challenge and understanding the opportunity and understanding the collaboration. So let me just make the case again. I invite people to look at uLearn, u-learn.net. I think it's shared in the chat line. This is a new business, but built on infrastructure which already exists. We're already talking to telco companies. We're already looking to have between 2 to 8 million on the platform within 18 months. We're looking to distribute a huge chunk of the content we have free of charge. We don't need to charge for it. We want to build out this capability. There will be, let me be clear, a professional or a premium product, which will be on a subscription model. But if we can drive 5, 10, 20 million people engagement, improve the learning outcomes, improve the ability to find a career, to improve the ability to deal with social and emotional learning, to deal with some of the mental health challenges. If we can do that, and we can afford to do that, working with strategic partners like the telco companies, we will have achieved something truly remarkable. I believe we are in a good position to do exactly that. Equally, I have a public company, I'm responsible to my shareholders, I need to drive profit. And there is more than enough customers. I mean, just run the simple numbers. You know, if you've got 1 million people free of charge and you've got 100,000 people paying you for your premium service, and you charge a sensible price that is right and ethical and appropriate, you have a very successful business. So those are my aspirations and ambitions. So stay tuned and watch carefully. But I'm not going to criticize the competition, but frankly, there's plenty of room for improvement.
Yeah, I agree 100%. The market, sometimes there's an assumption of people thinking that it might get too crowded, but if we think in the right direction, we look at the problem deeply, we'll realize that the potential is always there. It's sometimes...
If you look at Tesla, okay, I mean, remarkable. I mean, whether one likes the guy or doesn't like the guy, you have to admire him, okay? His business is worth more than Ford. Ford has been around for, I don't know how many years. So my point is there's plenty of opportunities, but you need to understand the market. You need to understand the challenges. You need to look at it, and what I've tried to indicate here, look at it from a consumer point of view. Don't look at it from a shareholder point of view. If you can make people happy, then people will go away and tell other people, this is really good, you need to come here because it's valuable. I mean, I could discuss this at length, but I do not want to open myself up to be trolled on Twitter or trolled on LinkedIn. But this is a really interesting conversation and needs to be discussed. I'm very happy to discuss it with Amdocs.
Sure, thank you. We have another one from LinkedIn, and the question is, we see that digital wallet is still an untapped territory. What work is happening in this area according to you? And what could be the potential of this?
Okay, I mean, look, again, a long question. I'm currently working on a digital wallet for culture and the arts. So one of the challenges in education is you're not normally taught the arts. So one of my portfolio companies, Marquee TV, has a relationship with the Royal Ballet Company, the Royal Opera House, with Royal Shakespeare Company, with the Victoria and Albert Museum. When you look at Marquee TV, it's a streaming media company, very rich content. But when I met the founder and we started talking, we started discussing the fact that if you want to teach dance, what better exemplar is there than somebody from the Royal Ballet or the Royal Bolshoi Ballet? And I'm not necessarily talking about teaching dance. I'm talking about teaching grit, perseverance, mastery. For me, it's not whether you can be taught dance. It's actually to be taught from the exemplars of what makes a great ballerina, what makes a great dancer. And again, one of the things with dance is very interesting because it's not just about the body, it's about the mind. To be a proficient, competent dancer, it's body and mind. For me, that's what education is about. It's not just about academic rigor. Anyone can get a university degree, can pass a test. That's only one piece of it. I want to help people be the best version of themselves. What we're doing, for example, in ULearn and what we're doing with Launch My Career is about helping people be the best version of themselves. That is our mission statement. That's the public company's mission statement. So there are many examples of what education needs to look like going forward. Education isn't just about passing a test or whatever else. So watch this space.
And we have another one from Akash. It's a little personal question for you, Alan. We can see a huge rack of books behind you. What kind of books you read, and is there any specific reading routine you follow?
Okay, so
Any
I'm
book
going
suggestions
to
related to innovation?
I'm going to share a secret now, but don't tell anybody. Okay, so I know there's only 2 or 3 people listening to this. This bookshelf is beautifully curated to look like this because I'm sitting in my 3rd bedroom. Behind the bookshelf, there are boxes of storage. There are suitcases. Basically, I'm in the storage cupboard. And I've been in the storage cupboard now for the better part of 2 years. I do come out occasionally. I get allowed out to walk the dog, and I've even been to meetings. And I've even been on an airplane recently. But this is beautifully curated to keep all the family junk behind and discreet. So that's please don't tell anybody. Okay. The second thing to say is, I mean, I have many favorite books. One of my favorite books is also quite a controversial book. I like Ayn Rand and her books, and Fountainhead in particular. These are extraordinary books, and they're worth reading, although these books are written many years ago. When you look at the world we live in today and look at some of the challenges in the world we live today, it's worth rereading. So I recommend Ayn Rand. I recommend lots of books. I mean, I'm surrounded by books. That doesn't make me intelligent, by the way. Owning books is one thing, reading them is something else. So.
For sure, we all struggle with that. We have one question that's about relevance. How do we customize content on the basis of what's going to be the top 5% and what's going to be the bottom 5%? How do we engage in learning without really, comparing them on a same scale, as everything is unique?
Okay, well, again, look, this is again a complex question. I mean, look, whether we like it or whether we don't like it, we live in a world of assessment. We're being assessed. You get assessed at school when you do a spelling test. You get assessed at university when you do an exam. You get assessed at enterprise when you do a good project or you do a less good project. You're getting assessed everywhere. So assessment sits everywhere. So if you're being assessed, surely there's a demand to drive relevance, to be able to drive information that can help you deal with the challenges. And we all have challenges. I don't care whether you're the chief executive of Amdocs or whether you're Alan Greenberg working in a portfolio or you're whoever you are. We all have these same challenges. So understanding the personal learning journey, understanding the personal identity, building a trust coefficient, understanding that we can actually control our data so we can open up and inquire it. I mean, I don't like Google. Okay, there's a statement. I'm probably going to get trolled for that statement. But Google is an advertising company. Okay, it's an advertising company. If you pay more money, you can get your product at the top of the list. It doesn't make it a good product. It just means you've got more money. And well, maybe it is a good product as well, possibly. I don't know. But it's an advertising company. So is Facebook. So do I trust Google? Do I trust Facebook? No. Do I use Google? Of course I use Google. Do I use Facebook? Yes, I use Facebook. But do I trust it? No. So I want to build relevance. I want to build, I mean, if you take, for example, you asked an example, so I will mention, if you look at companies like Coursera and Udemy, okay, education platforms, hugely successful, billion-dollar businesses. Coursera was built as a MOOC, okay? MOOCs don't work. It's proven they don't work. So they pivot their company to be a learning platform, and they're very commercially successful, and their share price will demonstrate it. But they're not necessarily built on the foundations of the next generation of education resources. I think there's a different model, which is built on my personal needs, my personal interest, what's relevant to me, and I can change my relevance as I see fit. And the internet can provide me with those resources, but only if I have the right infrastructure. It is an infrastructure challenge. And I repeat again, I think the blockchain is a key discipline of how we drive that new innovation. I mean, that's again a big subject. Happy to come back and discuss that another day.
Okay.
Have I upset anybody?
Such great insights from you, Alan, today. And I think we are all out of questions right now. And again, a wonderful conversation with you. And we're looking forward to having even more conversations in the future with you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining on LinkedIn, on Zoom, and we hope you all join us for the future sessions as well.
Thank you so much, Benny.